Okay.
Hey, Secreters, look who I have here for you today. The video I promised from Mr. Ben Asen, the one and only awesome photographer for The Secret Book and very good friend to Byron Preiss. Hi, Ben. Welcome.
Hi, Karen. How are you?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
Good. It's a little cold here in New York today, actually. A
Well,
cold spell. I mean, for this time of year, it's a little bit cold, but we're hanging in there.
well,
So a little also raining outside, which I wish the rain would be out in California and out west where they need it. But what are you going to do?
that's true
That's
too.
just life.
Yeah. So, well, and it's a little bit of New York City weather, right?
Yeah,
You get the cold snaps, but then that makes the leaves really beautiful. So
it does. And I get some of my best urban pictures in the fall and early spring. The light is so beautiful.
yeah.
And
Oh,
I'm looking forward to going out in a few days when the sun comes up early in the morning, going out and shooting New York.
oh
What I'd
yeah.
love to do.
No, that would be that's going to be some awesome photos that we'll get to see. And then I'm sure you're going to post them on your website.
Of course.
Yay. And what is, just so I know, some people may know and some people may not know, but the name of your website?
Oh, okay. It's shopart.benason.com. And
Awesome.
that's my fine art website. If you want to see my assignment work, it's just benason.com.
Okay.
So, which is very different than my fine art site. But you can see all the people I photographed over the years. And it's been a long career, I have to say, longer than I thought it would be. So,
That's a success problem.
well, yeah, but it's more than that. It's a passion. I love photography. I discovered it my last year of college. I needed an elective, so I didn't have to go to school on Fridays. And photography 101 was it was there, and I got into the class, and I really didn't take many photographs before that. I mean, I had Instamatics and I had a old Brownie and things like that, but I really wasn't into photography. And the minute I took my first pictures and developed my negatives and put that blank piece of paper into the chemical in the darkroom and the image came up, I was totally hooked. And it made me lead to a different path than I thought I was going to do. So I was a business major. I didn't know what I wanted to do. My father said, get a business degree. You could use it for everything and anything. And he was right because photography, it was a business. I mean, I ran a business.
Yeah.
I ran it alone for most of my life, but my wife helped me a little bit in the beginning when she had the time, but we had kids, and she
Mm-hmm.
went off and did something else. And but it's been a great run, and I made a lot of friends along the way. I
Yeah.
made you as a friend, which was really great, and your husband Tom, and I met your one son so far. So hopefully I'll meet the other ones and your daughter someday. But it's been a blast. It really has been a blast, and I'm very fortunate that I was able to do this.
Oh, so I love hearing the stories and the inspirations for you, um, especially wanting to get out of class on Friday because, who wouldn't want a 3-day weekend,
Nothing like a 3-day weekend.
right? And it's paid off.
It's paid off. Yeah, it really has. It really has.
So I want to talk to you a little bit about where the concept and kind of crazy childhood friendship slash what became a really good friendship with Byron Preiss and how you guys made this funny little cult classic Secret Book. So can you give me a little background about how you know Byron and how you guys kind of
Sure.
came to be with a friendship, long lasting lifetime friendship, uh,
Right.
but then and how he approached you about doing this book.
Well, I'll try to make a long story short. Byron had a cousin, and uh, and she was in kindergarten with me. Her name was Joan, and Joan's mother
Mhm.
was the sister of Byron's father, Ed. It's a little confusing because her name was Pearl and Byron's mother's name was Pearl as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. And our parents got friendly. You know, when you take your kids to school, I guess in kindergarten,
Mhm.
you know, the mothers all hang out in the schoolyard and they got friendly. And then the husbands got friendly. Uh, and Byron was the son of Pearl and Ed. Now, Byron was a little over 4 years younger than I was. So, you know, when you're that age, you're really not that friendly with a kid who's 4 years younger. So I was actually, when I met Joan, Byron was only one. I barely knew he even existed.
Mm.
But as the years went by, my brother Michael and Byron went to school together. They were about the same age, and they went to public school together. They went to middle school together. They went to high school together.
Mhm.
They weren't super friendly. We were friendly when our parents got together, but
Mhm.
my brother hung out with a different crowd. And I was like Byron. He was in the comic books when he was young. I'd go up to his house when our parents would meet and go up to his room, and you have to basically walk over piles and piles of comic books. And he had a lot more comics than I did, that's for sure. And as the years went by, we actually lost touch because, you know, he went off to college. Well, I
Mhm.
went off to college first, though I didn't go off. I actually went to college in Brooklyn where I lived. I lived with my parents. I didn't go away to school. And then later on, I think our fathers were talking to each other.
Mhm.
And, you know, Byron's dad, Ed, was telling my dad what he was doing. And he said, well, you know, Ben's a photographer. Wow, it seems like they should hook up somehow.
Yeah.
And I don't remember who called who. My gut feeling, Byron probably called me in those days. I was a little shyer in those days. I'm not afraid to call anybody. I mean, and I mean anybody. Um, uh, so we got together, and the next thing you know, he hired me to do a couple of author photographs for some authors. And then one day he said to me, you know, Ben, I had this idea for a book. I'm not sure what it's going to be called yet. It's about a treasure hunt, and I'll get back to you, but I really would like you to work on the book. And eventually he got back to me, and the secret was born. And you know, I met Joe Ellen and I met John Parad. Uh, I didn't meet John Palancar in the beginning. He was out in Ohio,
Mhm.
and but Byron had used him on a couple of projects already, and I know he wanted John to do this as well. And then we had a meeting. We had a meeting with Byron and Joe Ellen and Sean Kelly, the late Sean Kelly, unfortunately just passed away recently.
Mhm.
Ted Mann, they both worked for National Lampoon. And we had a meeting. I think it was at the National Lampoon office, I believe. I don't think it was at Byron's office. I can sort of visualize it, and
Mhm.
I don't think it was Byron's office. And he told us what it was about, and he told me what he wanted me to do. And Joellen was doing these soft sculptures. She had done some incredible work. She had a picture in the 25th anniversary of Playboy magazine. That was a very significant issue for a lot of reasons. It was their silver anniversary.
Mhm.
The interview was Marlon Brando, which they probably spent years trying to get Marlon Brando to do an interview.
Right.
Then there was an article about why the British love to dress in drag. And Joellen had created a soft sculpture of the British actor Robert Morley
Morley, yep.
in drag, sitting on a chair. And that picture was very important because later on, she would rework that sculpture
Mhm.
into the Unreal Estate Broker, which was one of the 60 some odd pictures I took for the book.
Wow.
So I don't remember a lot about that meeting.
Mhm.
And actually, we sat down, we talked about the photographs a lot, and so that was really it in the beginning. It still hadn't really happened yet. Contracts had to be signed and all that
Yeah.
stuff, which I didn't know much about in those days. I didn't even know much about copyright. So
Yeah. Copyright is a big deal.
copyright's a big deal. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But once it started, we had a lot of fun together. We did a lot of crazy stuff, I must
So
say.
let me ask you this.
Sure.
When he told you he was kind of thinking about this crazy treasure book,
Mhm.
and then of course you guys all go headlong in, and you're a photographer and she's doing the dolls, and we've got these other illustrators and painters. Um, did Byron ever really talk about the basis of what it was about, or was it all kind of just kept secret?
In the beginning, it was, for me anyway, it was pretty much a secret.
Yeah.
um, I can't remember the first photograph I did, but I kind of, he actually went out with me and Joe Ellen on the first time, and a couple of times he went out with us. And but then after that, it's like he has a spirit of '76. So I want you to shoot it on the Staten Island ferry, and of course, this was back in 1981.
My
So
favorite
of course,
photo.
yeah, and the World Trade Center is in the background, and we were told what to do. We sat the sculpture out there on the gate, which was a
Mhm.
little bit scary. I'm trying to remember how we fastened it to the gate or not. And in those days, this was before 9/11. You did crazy stuff on things, and people didn't care much. They weren't aware about a terrorist attack or anything like that. So
Right.
uh, we shot the Spirit of '76 with the city in the background, which is an awesome background in those days. And then we shot the Spirit of '76 sitting on a bench inside the ferry, and we went back and forth. So I actually think, I believe that we shot it going back from Staten Island to Manhattan a second time to sort of like fine tune it. I knew the bench was not as significant as getting New York City in the background.
Wow. So
Um,
did you have kind of creative, at times were you instructed, and then other times did you have more creative reign over how you were going to do the shooting?
uh, yeah, I mean, Byron gave us sort of an idea of what he wanted. He wanted us to get the Statue of Liberty. The unfortunate thing is, you have to understand, the way the boat goes out, the Statue of Liberty is on the side of the boat. So in the indoors, there are windows. Okay. So we couldn't shoot through the windows. I didn't have the right lens. Maybe if I had scattered it out a couple of times, I could have got the right lens. But the problem was, excuse me, the sculptures weren't very big. I mean, I don't know, they were
Yeah,
18
I remember
inches.
getting to hold Mater Damon at
Yeah, I
Walden's
mean,
house,
so the
and
whole idea of getting the right perspective with the sculpture and the Statue of Liberty, it was possible, but it wasn't possible that day. And Byron loved the shot of New York City in the background, especially with the World Trade Center. So that was the shot.
it was almost a 2-for-1. You got the spirit of '76, and then you also got corporate giants and the cityscape behind it, kind of thing, which is
That's
really
right.
neat to
That's
have
right.
both of those together.
Yeah, and if you looked at that skyline now, you wouldn't recognize it. There are so many other buildings that are bigger, taller, skinnier. It's I still love the old skyline. I'm
Mm.
old fashioned about that, but that's the way it goes. That's
Iconic.
progress.
Yeah, it's iconic. And
Yeah.
one of the things too, when you look back at that time, and people who are my secreters here in the group who want to kind of go back and I always say, put your 1980s glasses on, right? so that you can envision the way all of you saw the landscape.
Right.
And it helps give perspective to what you could see. And you almost have to now, obviously 40 years later, because we're coming up on the 40th anniversary, go back and look at a lot of different photographs of that city skyline and the way that it looked, and other cities as well.
Sure.
When we talk about cities, I know there's been commentary. I just want to kind of set the record straight for our listeners and watchers, but we have felt and have seen you comment that Byron would never have confirmed any of the cities for anyone. And I know that since we are at the 40th year mark, but also prior to his passing, we had a good 20 plus years where, to our understanding, Byron was the only one and only gatekeeper of the secret. And he could have confirmed cities to you in that span of time up to his passing. And so would he ever have confirmed the cities?
I don't know if he ever would have confirmed it. He didn't confirm it to me. He always told me that he was the only one that knew where these casts were buried.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a reason not to believe him, because I have to tell you, he was a very ethical guy. He didn't curse, at least not. He never cursed with me. I can't say the same for me with him, but I really believe that he's the only one that knew where everything was buried. And I have to say that's it. I mean, I didn't know any of the cities, so I didn't know if I went to Washington D.C. I went down to Florida, though I was in Miami.
Yeah.
I didn't go to northern Florida.
Mm-hmm.
I thought maybe one of them was buried in Florida. Maybe one of them was buried in San Francisco, which is the background of this photograph here, which is which is actually a picture I took back in, I think, 2012. When I was visiting a friend out there with my wife Betsy. But
Speaking of Betsy, she makes a cameo in the book as well, correct?
Oh yes, she did. So Betsy is in the she's in the prep school, one of the prep school photographs, which is in front of Brooks Brothers department store, which unfortunately the building's still there. And the Brooks Brothers plaque is still there. I can't remember what year they were founded. I know it was in the 1800s, believe it or not. But it's now, the first floor is like a coffee bar and a venue for people to get together to have meetings. So, I mean, the clothing store exists. It just doesn't exist at the old flagship store on 44th and Madison. I actually walked by there about a week ago. I was trying to find the spot where I photographed her. I was sort of thrown off because there was actually a for rent sign in the window.
Oh.
So, but those are her legs.
There we go.
And, yeah, so she is a contributor to the secret, I guess.
Some amazing legs.
Yes, yeah, she still does, actually.
She's a beautiful lady. That's okay.
Thank you.
I wanted to say that because Eric, who runs the 12, he's a part of his own secret, the Secret of Treasure Hunt. He has his own group as well, Eric Thomas, and a great group. But he had posted something about Brooks Brothers the other day, and I made a point to ask about that with you too.
Really?
Because, Brooks Brothers has a really interesting history in New York, from the four brothers that were immigrants here to their home they had built close to some of the Strauss family, right, which is now what is in Inwood Hill Park. So we hear a lot of people talk about, obviously, when they're looking for these casks, looking at all the parks, and of course they're mentioned in the secret book too, which is kind of all that historical element. So how it all ties in there is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And how Byron thought to pull these elements together. Did he tell you you need to get the Brooks Brothers sign, or?
He told me to get it in one of the photographs. But he said, shoot it a few different ways,
Mhm.
and that's what we did. So, I mean, and ended up, I didn't even know what the final pics were until very close to when they printed the book.
Mhm.
Of course, they took a lot of my print. I made prints. I made 5x7, 8x10 prints,
Yeah.
and they did have my negatives as well, which is a whole nother story. I really can't recall. I just can't recall
Mhm.
if I shot everything in 35mm slides as well. I don't think I did, because we had a budget, and I had a certain amount of money to play with,
Sure.
and I was getting paid a certain amount of money. But there were certain pictures he said you got to shoot 35mm slides and black and white as well.
Mhm.
But when the publishing came about, I think they just did not have the money to print everything, and
The way that it should have been printed,
right. And
which I think is awesome, because then that leads us to be able to look at the photographs you have. If we wanted to get one, we could see the way it was intended to be in the book, which I think is pretty important, because, with Joellen getting the notes and saying, I need these fairies to look like this and this one to look like that, and so on and so forth, how all of the themes then would tie together and would need your photographic element to show those things.
that's right. If we did that book now, of course, we would shoot with a digital camera, and one click of the button, I just move a couple of sliders over in Photoshop, and we can make it black and white. We can make it sepia tone.
Mhm.
But in those days, printing books was in black and white was a very complicated process. Unfortunately, Bantam, I guess, had a restriction on what kind of paper they were going to use. It wasn't the greatest paper. So
Mhm.
the black and white pictures really suffered. And, I have a big box of negatives and contact sheets.
Mhm.
And when I look at some of the prints I made, they were gorgeous.
Mhm.
And then I look at the book, I'm going like, oh my God. But that's the way it was. It happens a lot in book publishing. Of course, the color paintings were pretty good. I thought they were pretty good for the day.
Mhm.
Color was expensive to do. You had to do color separations from a slide. It was not cheap. I mean, digital has made it a lot cheaper to print photographs or to get or prepare the photographs for printing
Mhm.
than it would have been if we were shooting film.
Yeah.
It's just the way it was. It's that, nothing you could do about that.
So,
In 1981, anyway.
right. And speaking of 1981,
Yes.
did you, I know some people have said the imagery in some of the photography in the book, were there overlays, photoshopping, anything, what's a 1980s Photoshop look like? Is there one?
It was called retouching and airbrushing. And retouching, you actually retouch the negative. I can't even explain the process to you. I did a lot of portraits back in the 80s with film, and people still wanted some of the wrinkles softened and things taken out. I once had to have a mustache taken off of a picture because the guy had a mustache, and he said my ad agency said I shouldn't have a mustache. So instead of reshooting, they took the mustache off. They recreated his upper lip, and you couldn't tell at all. But I didn't do that work. That was done by a retoucher. I have a retoucher that does a lot of my work now, and she started off with film. She didn't start off with the digital.
Mhm.
digital retouching now is done by all young people who never was schooled with film, the same way they weren't schooled with photography, with film cameras.
Mhm.
And I think in some ways photography has suffered because of that, because when you learn with film, when you shoot with film,
Mhm.
you don't really know what you got until the film is developed. With digital, you could take, 5, 6 different shots, and you could process it many different ways and
Mhm.
make it look a lot different. And you couldn't do that with film.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm glad I learned with film. To me, not knowing, you had to work harder with film because you wanted the picture to be perfect. So
Yeah.
and with digital, you go, oh, I could fix that in Photoshop. That's not a big deal,
Right. And
and
then,
it's not most of the time.
yeah, but now, with all of the newer technology, I guess it could be confusing for hunters of today to try to apply some of the techniques in the last 20, 30, 40 years, but
Right.
it really wasn't available.
Right.
So,
And there's a picture, there's a picture in the book of the Philharmonic Orc, which I have on my website for sale, but we shot the Philharmonic Orc, which is this crazy looking conductor.
Mhm.
I think Joe Ellen said she thinks it looks like Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson was a very young kid when that photograph was taken. But anyway, in the book, the Philharmonic Orc is conducting, and you see the seats of the theater behind you.
Mhm.
But when I was going through the negatives, I found a negative, and I guess this, Joe Ellen was sitting in the background. Now, they decided not to use that photograph.
Yeah.
When I found that negative, I decided to make it that negative for a lot of reasons. One of the reasons is my favorite filmmaker in the world is Alfred Hitchcock. And as you know, starting, I think, 1929, I believe in the movie The Lodger, which was filmed in England, it was a silent movie, he appeared in every single one of his films until he died.
Wow.
And I thought, what a great thing to do, have Joe Ellen in the photograph, just sitting there like this, looking. So, and Joe Ellen didn't know it. I really surprised her. She could not believe it. She says, I kind of remember sitting there. I thought they retouched me out. I said, no, what happened is that I think you were there. I said, Joe Ellen, I think you better get out of the photograph. So that was kind of cool.
That's fun. That's a great photo of her too, by the way. That very longing look that they have of her in the back of the book is great. It is great. So I had so many more questions, and I know we're running into the 45-hour mark that we had scheduled for our stop time. I still have some more questions.
Okay.
So would you like to take a pause and then we'll come back and do another video?
Absolutely. You just let me know. Okay.
There's so many more things that I wanted to talk about, and it seems like we have such great stories to hear from you, and I don't want to ever cut you off. I want you to be able to say all the memories, all the things that you can remember and want to share.
Sure.
Before I let you go, do you feel the secret community, Byron would be really kind of taken aback by the resurgence of this little secret book, this little treasure hunt? And how do you think he would want the community to go about the hunt and with each other?
Well, first of all, I put this book behind me probably 6 months after it came out.
Mhm.
Maybe even before that. You know, I had 15, I think I got 15 copies of the book.
Mhm.
I have one copy left. You know, I gave copies away to my brother, my sons have copies. I gave one to my sister-in-law. I even gave one to a friend of Betsy's in San Francisco. Her name was Consuelo. And I gave it to her back in the mid to late 80s, because Betsy said, you got to bring a gift, bring her a book, right?
Mhm.
And then when I started selling my prints and did my first podcast last year, all of a sudden I get an email or a message from some guy that he said, who's Consuelo? I go, what is he talking about? And then I realized Consuelo, Betsy's friend from Italy. Betsy was her assistant in Italy for a year. She was married to the first Italian American ever to graduate Annapolis, who became a US admiral during World War II and was at Pearl Harbor.
Oh my gosh.
So this guy bought the book on eBay.
Wow.
And when he got the copy of the book, it was inscribed to Consuelo, signed by me. Is that not crazy?
That is crazy.
Yeah. I mean, and there's some other stories like that as well. So I think Byron would be excited, but knowing what Byron was like, and we were good friends. We summered together for 2 summers out in Sag Harbor with his then his girlfriend, who became his wife, and my wife. And Byron really didn't have a mean bone in his body. He really didn't. He was extraordinary, because I have some mean bones. Not mean in the sense that I'm mean to people, but I get angry when people are mean.
Right.
Okay, for no reason.